crazy. I don't know what. But I appreciate y'all coming out on this hot night. I think we'll kind of try to move right along and get out of here in a reasonable hour before we drip all over Bob's barn here. I'd like to thank Bob Dykhuis and the crew at Dykhuis Farms for having us out here. Always nice when you ask somebody to have a meeting and they say yes instead of having it on. It's great. Anyway, the purpose of the series is really to get farmers talking to each other about what soil quality means. I'm just kind of here to facilitate and give some people some ideas and make sure you get MEEP credits if you wanted. Anybody here for MEEP Phase 1 credits? Anybody care about that tonight? Going once, going twice? We'll just move right along and skip that part then. What is a healthy soil? I kind of wrote up a little thing when I started this, just a one-page thought on what's a healthy soil, and what it boils down to is it's got organic matter, it's got pore space, it's got an active biology that can help you break down your residues, and it's meeting your needs and your expectations for yield goals and all of that. I think you need to think of it as a continuum, not something that's, it's healthy or it's not healthy, it's a little less healthy, a little more healthy, something like that. I think we'll get right into 20 questions with Bob here tonight. Bob Dykhuis started in 1978 with 80 sows.
Yeah.
And the organization peaked at about 1,800, correct? 17, 1,800?
20,000.
At 20,000.
And we're down to 16,000.
Down to 16,000. So it's not any way you slice it, it's a real big operation. One of the things I thought it would be fun to do, since we do hear a lot of talk in America about big farmers versus little farmers and all that, was actually talk a little business with Bob after we talk agronomy with Bob, just to see how you keep a big vertically integrated organization like this running successfully over a large number of years. So anyway, and any of you who farm or help farmers or any of that, if you have questions for Bob as we're going on, you need some clarification, by all means ask. We're a small group here tonight, so let's get to that. Once we interrogate Bob here and kind of get through this part of the meeting, we can walk outside. I did dig a soil pit, did pretty well. We had moisture down deep and I had corn roots going down about 2 feet, so I tried to pick a good one.
Good, and yeah, I'll pick most of them.
Yeah. It's certainly, we're certainly having the kind of year where we remember who's really in charge of the world. This is our, printed this off just before we got done. This is as of July 3rd, where the drought is official in the United States. Everything that colored is some kind of official drought. We're only yellow, we're only getting started in drought conditions. And as you can kind of see, a lot of the corn belt is really getting hammered. And I think that's going to have some implications for all of you who feed livestock this year, for sure. I'll just kind of send that around and make that. So Bob, where do you get your information on making these agronomic choices?
A lot of that comes down to just basic science that I picked up in college and just reading. It's more the trends in tillage and stuff that's changing, and that's probably more from magazines and DTN and things like that, probably.
Okay. What do you read from magazines?
Oh, I get most of them.
You get most of them?
No, not the no-till magazines.
You will now.
So yeah, and I do see that. But I think I think I've always, I'm a pig farmer, but I enjoy crop farming, and so this is more almost my hobby that I need to also be successful at.
Okay.
And so it allows us to maybe fund some things that wouldn't be always that practical, and so we can try things, and so we do over the years try a lot of things ourselves also. But it really is very basic with getting a seed bed, getting crops to grow, fertility management, and now it's going deeper with other ratios of nutrients and micronutrients and the life of the soil and stuff, and I think that's really exciting. And there's kind of more science that's kind of getting to the farmer now to demonstrate, instead of the stuff just being at the university level and everyone goes, that'll never work. And so, yeah, it's just developed over time with a lot of different things. So.
It's interesting you say that, because my mentor, Gary Zimmer, his book is up here, and if any of you want to borrow it, you're welcome to. He was really all about demonstration. He said, you know, this research stuff is cute, but farmers want it demonstrated on a large scale. They want to talk to other farmers who are doing it and really see it in action more than they want to read a paper about it. I think that's really helped through for the years. So why conservation tillage? Is chisel plow gone, or is it rusty? Or is it shiny?
The chisel plow, right? I might as well sit up here.
Oh,
I
that'd
can
be good.
see people, right?
Yeah, well, just
Okay.
That'd be great.
Sure.
You know, we haven't arrived to where we're going, and when we know what that is, then we'll know what to do. So, so to reduce tillage, there's a lot of things you need to do. A lot of things that have to be right, and then conditions have to go right and stuff. And so the chisel plow or ripper or whatever you want to use is still there to straighten stuff out and to take advantage of opportunities at times. So I would never stand here and say I have the answers and I know where we're going. We're still moving toward reduced tillage and better soil health and better drainage, and there's a whole lot of things. And tillage, fall tillage especially, can cover up a bunch of that, and you pay the long price in the end probably in soil quality and stuff, but it's not something that you feel immediately. And that's what's so difficult, is it's a process over time to get really healthy soil.
Did you do some fall chiseling last year?
No.
Anybody fall chisel last year on anything? Harvey? How'd that ground work this spring? Because it did not get frozen very well this year at all.
No, that was mallow. Worked out really nice.
Did it? Okay. I know that's a little different than some of what I heard from some of the other fellows that really had to whoop that pretty hard this year to get it done, because it really didn't freeze to break those clods up this year. But I mean, this is why I like to get farmers talking to each other, because sometimes, you know, those of us who think we know the answers, we get something we don't expect. So that's good. That's why
Spring work worked terrible.
Oh, you mean
Spring work worked terrible.
Yeah.
What we chiseled was chunky, could hardly knock it down, but not the fall ground.
Right, and that's what you see though, is you get rid of that residue, and then you don't have to stir it. Heavy ground, I mean, sandier ground is so forgiving and stuff, you can do all kinds of things with it, but a heavy soil, you either have to decide you're going to work it or in the fall, or you better be real careful in the spring and just work on the surface. And that's what we've been trying to concentrate more on. And but like I said, we're not there yet. There's a whole lot of things have to go away.
let's see. Well, we just talked about fall tillage a little bit.
On the fall tillage, so it's important that you do get a frost as a part of it. Is that the missing component though? Is it
I would
It
say
kind of melts together.
Freezing it apart.
yeah, freezing the part?
It's nice, but it will melt and dry up, and then you can blast it apart in the spring. Pretty decent.
we're going to go out and look at the harrow and the gentill in a minute here. When we had talked in your office a few weeks ago, you talked about how you tend to run some older equipment. I would say old equipment, but maybe older than some of your contemporaries run. Talk about the upside and the downside to to that strategy from a farming perspective and a business perspective?
We don't farm for a lifestyle. We work too hard for that, and it's a business, and lifestyle is family and stuff like that, and so we don't need an identity of what we're driving. I drive a Honda Element, and if anything, I'd rather demonstrate that I'm not typical, and I'd rather work on the business side of it. So we'll run older equipment, but we'd rather invest our money in farmland, land improvement like tile, conservation stuff, irrigation, technology like GPS. And I delayed GPS a long time. Jeremy probably would have liked it if he got it earlier. But GPS is very expensive, and we need to be able to do multiple things with it. And when we did, we started to run the planner with it. So the first year we had GPS, Jeremy, we went to variable rate, right, seeding, and we went to the individual row shutoffs, and we went to auto steer, and then that year did we put on the sprayer, or was that the next year? Following year we put it on the sprayer and put the controls for the off-on, so it turns the sprayer off and on. And then we also went to the nitrogen management system with it. So it's monitoring the vegetative index and dribbling 28% based on the vegetative index.
That's the color of the corn plant basically tells you how much you're putting on? Or?
It's color and other, it's an infrared stuff. It sends out its own light and measures it coming back, right? Technically you can do it in the dark.
So you guys kind of waited until GPS was really a robust and less expensive system before you got into it?
And then we also upgraded it so that it could run the grade on the tile walls.
Okay.
So that allows us to do our own tiling, and we lay it out with that, and it does grade, and you can find it back.
So you're really a function over form guy. You don't care how shiny it is, it's just got to work.
Right. It has to work well, and there's timing things. We farm 2,300 acres, and I don't think we have enough to justify the cost of a new combine even, so we'll buy a 1 or 2 row machine. And then I'd rather have a little more capacity and be able to have less cost in it for the same cost and try to be more timely.
All right.
But everyone's different. If you're over a certain size, or you have priorities of got to get done and you don't want repairs and stuff, we have mechanics. So, those are all individual choices.
2,300 acres, 16,000 sows. All the pigs from those sows. Doesn't sound like you've got a land base to cover your grain needs.
No, we buy a lot of grain. And most of our hogs are raised on contract growers' farms, so they're dispersed with with their own cropping activities. So our typical grower would be a crop farmer or someone associated with a crop farmer that would have a need for that manure and utilize as a nutrient. So our crops take the manure from our reproductive facilities. That typically what we own ourselves.
And you're primarily contracting on the finishing then?
Yes.
Okay. And that, from an environmental perspective, then you're actually, if you will, exporting your phosphorus problem by having your other, not to say you have a phosphorus problem, of course, but
no, that's real though.
Because the sows produce less phosphorus than the growing pigs do. by having the growing pigs somewhere else. Someone else is dealing with that phosphorus management issue.
Right. It's been a revolution in the hog business in the last, I think our first contract facility went in 1994, so we've been doing that since then. We have quite a few more hogs in Indiana now than we have in Michigan under that program. But around here, if guys can't utilize that phosphorus, it becomes a burden. They got to pay to get rid of it. Other places, it's part of, okay, building costs me this much, interest on it, my utilities and stuff, my labor. What do I get? I get my contract payment and I get my manure. And that is a real part of the deal. And you know, they have calculated how many $1,000 worth of manure they get out of that facility, and that is figured right in. And so it's quite a process.
Has that gotten easier as the price of buying phosphorus has increased substantially?
Oh yes. Yeah, it's where, and that has been difficult for the earliest growers to understand, because the later growers who want the fertility, you know, that equation has changed, so a new per pig space rate hasn't gone up much because of those other values, and interest rates have gone down and things like that. So that's been a huge shift.
Let's talk about another huge shift is when we're talking about, you know, the shifting sands in pig agriculture, if you will. You've got McDonald's, Burger King, a bunch of other different big names saying now they don't want any more gestation crates.
So they didn't do with soil.
Yeah, go ahead. You're the one who said you're a businessman first and an agronomist second. We'll talk business a little bit with you. It's much more interesting. What's that doing to your world, to the world of pigs right now? I mean, is it affecting you yet, or is it just something that's kind of out there on the horizon, charging this way? We might as well talk about, what do we got, 8 years to go before you got to come up to the new standards that Michigan negotiated?
Well, I
Humane
mean,
Society?
It was my job on the National Pork Users Board of Directors to manage welfare issues. So,
Okay.
so I saw this coming a long time. So
Yeah.
a little over a third of our sows already meet that requirement. We've been experimenting with it for a number of years. What's it doing? It's pitting the industry against each other right now, because some say we ought to just fight it and just somehow not give the customers what they want. And others are going there and saying, hey, this is an opportunity. And so it makes it really difficult for those board members and staffs of the national organizations to deal with it. But ultimately, the customer is right, and I think you have to realize that things are changing on the farm, and things are changing, the perception of things change also. So what we used to do on a hog farm 10 years ago, which was commonplace and normal, is totally out. We would fire you for treating animals the way we did 10 years ago, simply because we have figured out a lot better ways to do things. And how we handle them, if you keep animals calm. Today, we have, I think we'll have a half a dozen loads going out and stuff. We can handle hogs in 100-degree weather. You just figure out how to do it and be careful and stuff. So you can figure that out, but the average person will tell you now, or some group will figure out a nice little, like with sows and stalls, she can't turn around, that can't be done. So, and you can't overcome that. And so then you have to figure out other ways to do things and figure out how long you have to do it.
we've talked a little bit about tile. And, you know, the more people I talk to who run this heavy ground, high water table, the more people say tile is absolutely critical to conservation tillage, period, full stop.
That's right. You don't buy a flower pot without a hole in the bottom, do you? Jeremy can chime in here too. He's usually pretty quiet. Over the years, for many years, we've been weighing fields. And so we started putting tile in, I think in 78 or something, 81 or something like that. And we started tiling the low spots to take out the wet spots. And Nick Stott was the first guy who tiled for us, and he used to always say, the problem with that is you keep moving the wet spots uphill. And because you can get on it faster, the wet spots, and then it's wet up beyond where you tiled the wall.
Was that the tile that did that, or was it getting on it earlier?
Getting on it earlier.
Oh,
yeah.
okay, there we go.
Yeah, it's just, and so we've, as long as I can remember, we have weighed individual fields over a platform scale. And now we weigh it on the grain cart itself with a scale on there. And we have always weighed fields, and now we have yield monitors also, which I'm not enamored with. But, what we found is a field that we tiled a quarter, we'd have a little increase. We tiled a half, we'd have more, and we tiled the whole field, and it's just that much better. And so it makes so much difference. And as we started pushing the envelope on nutrients, you have to, in order to know how far to go, you have to know how far not to go, so you start to see some hunger and start to see some spots. And it's always between the tile lines. And it is always that nutrient availability and preservation is so much better in well-drained soil and on heavy ground. And so if you're looking at reducing or looking at just plain nutrient efficiency, you need that drainage. And the other thing, if you start to look at structure, we dig up a lot of tile to find them, and because we're putting tile in between, it's the most laborious, lousy job you can have, because it takes so long when they haven't been GPSed in. But you can tell a lot by kind of the soil structure as you peel it back where the tile are, especially if it's been volume. It's the only way you can tell. And so it just improves the soil. It's more mellow. It's hard in between. It just changes that heavy soil and reduces runoff, and then you can start to reduce tillage and other things. Yes.
Pattern tile. How far apart do you put it?
On heavy ground we were at 50 feet, and now we're down to 40 feet, and we're starting to put them in between the 50s. In between the 50 foot. Especially if it's a sandier piece with a clay end, we'll definitely go in between it. And the sweet spot is somewhere 40 feet, and maybe the low spots or whatever, you may need a little bit more, but 40 feet seems to be okay. 50 feet, you definitely see a 10-foot area in the middle, definitely.
Any desire to put a control structure on the end of those tiles after this year and some of the heavier ground? I know people are thinking positively about that in sandy ground, but
a lot of this has too much slope, and so we have a field that potentially, if we run carefully along the contour, it's a possibility we could get them in flat enough that we could get controlled structures. Unfortunately, there's a gas line right down the middle of it. But John Zoot has an ear drain field, but I don't think
He never used it. I don't think he ever used it.
Right. So it has to be laid in carefully. Most of ours have too much slope that you block the end and it'll just boil off a little ways from it. And so it really has to be, you know, fields like this, just there's too much slope, but you still need the drainage.
Okay. We kind of hinted at this earlier. Fewer sows, but more pigs. How's a guy do that? Details every day?
Get on my daughter. Yeah, there's a big revolution in sow productivity going on. And nationally, the herd is improving 2% a year.
Is that feeding? Is it genetics? Is that all of the above? Management?
It's everything. It's really intensive management. So your finding is you need to develop that female properly, and then it's managing feed intake and metabolic levels at breeding and implantation, and then managing keeping feed levels down and managing body condition really good so that they can carry that litter and then farrow a big litter and then eat like crazy while they're lactating. So then you get into the dairy thing where you just huge intakes and you measure that and try to keep conditions such so they can get those huge intakes and then huge energy levels of coaxing the community for breeding.
Oh, it sounds just, I mean, having been trained in dairy management, it's like dairies, you know, you got to raise the heifers right, you got to breed them right, you got to feed them, not too much, but, you know, enough to get them calf, and then you really got to feed them right when they're in that early lactation because they're peeling weight off, they're peeling off body weight and milking it off.
Right, and we track all those intakes based on each sow unit. So a sow unit would be 2,500 to 3,000 sows with a manager and stuff and all separate tracking. The trouble is with tracking, just like anything with crops, is it's the average. And you can't tell what's happening to the least or the best. And so then you just have to get in and the people care. People want to work, but they don't want to strategically work. And that's just a constant challenge to be successful. It's just details.
Yeah. I spent some time looking at your newsletters, and it's a very interesting organization because it is so out there compared to, I think, a lot of our other farmers who would rather just kind of hide under a rock and do their business. And you know, you guys, frankly, are putting yourself out there by having that stuff online.
I know it.
Does that come back to bite you, or do you gain some credibility with regulators because you're out there?
I think our mission statement and key strategies are on there. We try to leave that out, and we've been trying to be leaders in the community and provide opportunity and do that from a wholesome perspective. And we try to be open. Like I said, we don't have all the answers. We're lucky, and we have a lot to learn, and agriculture is constantly changing. Realizing that the things we're doing today might be illegal tomorrow. Who knows? Who thought CO2 would be a bad thing? I remember in high school, that was, if you could get an engine that could put out CO2, that would be great, right? You know, you just never know how things are going to change, but you just be open and change and adapt and understand how to do that. And when you have 100 employees, you have to figure out how to lead your people, and a lot of contract growers, and that takes communications and presence and relationships and maintenance and.
Yeah, you didn't have an org chart there on the internet for me to figure out exactly who's going where, but it did seem like you had a fair number of, call them middle managers, people with clear areas of responsibility that, they can kind of handle some of that stuff.
We try to be a pretty flat organization, if you understand what that means. So we hate organizational charts like go like this. I just hate it. And so we track a lot of data and stuff, and we stream that in electronically. So every hog that's slaughtered has just a tremendous amount of data with it. That all comes in. All of our production records, so from baby pig production to feed that goes into every batch to market hogs sold, that all balances through the accounting system to cash. So that's the only way to keep the integrity of that system. And we've seen what a low integrity system does. You don't get any good information. And so it's taken a lot. My son Joe sets that up, and that then everyone has to plug into that. And we're continuing to do that into different areas. So like the shop here, we inventory all parts, putting another parts thing in, and all of our mechanics will have iPhones, and they can link into that part, and then it goes to accounting to the job they're working on. So once you get it set up, that's good. So that's how you have a flat organization where the guy who inputs the data and starts all the finishing groups of 1,000 head, he's the guy that's also entering the feed data, which actually is streaming all electronically into accounting from the feed mills, and he's the guy that's doing the logistics on paper. And so you have to have key people wearing a lot of different hats, all feeding into that.
Let's jump off on there and get back to agronomy. The purpose of our meeting. You've talked a lot about all this information you collect on hogs and all that. Do you feel comparable levels of information coming in for your agronomic concerns? Are you grid sampling? Are you pulling that data together and using that to make some strategic decisions?
We grid sample and have probably for 20 years or 15 years. We collect a lot of data, and the grid sampling really tells you where to put your lime, because our phosphorus levels are high enough, and with the way we spread manure, typically we wouldn't be adding potash. It's just keeping it. And so then and we've been doing micronutrient testing to try to understand if we can sulfur and some of these other micronutrients. But manure has that. We're supplementing diets to the animals, and so there's a lot of stuff in manure that needs some of that micronutrient need. And so the soil testing is real. We do a lot of feed testing also, so we feed a lot of liquid byproducts and stuff, and we test a lot of manure, a lot of samples every year. And it is really hard to get good, consistent readings on liquid, and if you do soil tests, you got a number there, but what does that mean? Right. Because you can take another one and it'll be a different number, and so you kind of look at trends and where you're going. And nitrogen management is kind of the same way, and that's why we jumped on this Optilex thing, because it's been so frustrating managing nitrogen without just blasting all kinds of extra on it.
How long have you been doing that operation?
This is our third year. And it's been different every year. So 2 years ago, we had big rains, and the year before that also, we did a lot of pre-cyclus nitrate testing, and basically you had things pretty well set, right, for the spring. We had our manure on, had our corn coming up, nice color, maybe even side dress some, And then boom, 5.5 inches, and we just watched everything fall. Every week the pre-sidedness nitrate test was just going crazy, and then what do you do? And so that has helped, but the amount of nitrogen you put on can vary so much from year to year based on it. And this year it's actually quite good. It's been great retention of nitrogen. Last year was okay too, right? The year before you had to add a lot. So nitrogen is really elusive, and it can denitrify in this heavy soil between the plate, between the tile lines, and it can leach out in some of it.
Alright. Questions, folks?
Tissue samples out for all of the corn and when it's growing, does that give you any feedback on?
I'm a bigger fan of tissue sampling, frankly, than I am of the PSNT. I think the tissue samples will very much tell you exactly how that plant is doing. Where the PSNT, by the time that thing goes off to the lab and comes back to you, that nitrogen status could be completely different. And that's kind of why I like these systems that actually read the color of the plant and immediately make the adjustment rather than waiting. The tissue testing, or even like the post-season stalk testing, that gives you, I think, a better snapshot of where your whole system is, how your whole system is doing, getting all those different nutrients into the plants. Now, I guess the one thing I wonder about is, okay, you get a tissue test back that says the plant's not getting such and such a nutrient. Well, is that because you didn't put the nutrient out there, or is there another reason why that plant didn't get that nutrient? So, I think it's better than some of the tools we have, but I think it's just one of many you need.
Jeremy, you want to mention the change in the software on that Optorex this year? They're asking for more information.
Yeah, they continue to improve that, make improvements. This year they've made a step to where you got a lot more adjustments to do it. You can set your parameters. Before it was just kind of generic in a way. You can set your optimum economic rate, any pre-side or any nitrogen you've already added in your starter or you put on, and any other nitrogen you think is there, either from manure or the soil is currently holding. So it's a lot more ability to fine-tune on the go compared to what it was. So, yeah.
What's next for Dykhuis Farms agronomically?
Well, we're working on, we continue to look at manure handling and stuff, and if you go out to the field, you can see it's really difficult to get a really nice uniform application, and you see that, and it's expensive. Currently, we're drag hosing about everything, and we would like to start irrigating more manure after more storage and possibly separation and stuff. So we could see that as an efficient way to apply that manure right when the crop needs it, and it's not wet, and it's not going to make the clay soil wet and you have to work it.
Right.
So that's a big issue that we're always dealing with heavy soil. And so we'll be continuing to try things and moving that way. And we'll continue to pound in tile and try to get more fields that are really well drained, that we can reduce tillage on and get more comfortable.
What did you think of our meeting last week? We were on a real no-till farm, had a bunch of real advocates for no-till. Of course, they've all bought vertical tillage discs now. I don't know what that means in the world of no-till, but is that where we're all going to end up? We all going to be no-tillers someday, or?
Well, I think the key is, it appears that with proper management, especially with heavy soil, what you do on the top is just feeding the soil and kind of leveling it and trying to get a seed bed and letting it open up and get its worm burrows and keeping its own structure underneath. And it seems like it takes time, but we have some fields that we've been slowly doing less tillage and just working the surface in one form or other, and it's starting to work. And it drives me crazy a little thinking about it, but it's fun to be with people who have a passion for soil, and that it's a lot easier to be around people who have a passion for driving equipment, and sometimes the two of those are
Yeah, that's why we have tractor pulls.
As an outlet?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think it should become a national sport, maybe an Olympic sport. Last little bit on business, and then we'll go outside and look at some equipment and let you all cook for a while here. Talk about hedging and the importance of hedging in managing your business, forward contracting, all that good stuff. And we don't need a seminar here, but say a few words if you will.
We went from a company that was absolute no hedging 5 years ago to hedging a high percentage out as far as there is when we can make a healthy profit. And so we work that our whole integrated record system projects what hogs are where and what feed needs to be done, and so it's a combination of forward pricing ingredients and forward pricing market hogs, and never more than minutes apart for us anymore. So we track that margin. We know our costs. We predict what our costs will be continually, and we get emails when targets are achieved in quarters of the year that can go all over a year. And so that's put into percentiles, and we look at a lot of history, and when we achieve certain percentiles of margin, we lock animals in. And sometimes that lasts for literally minutes in a quarter, and then sometimes there's a lot of opportunity. And so right now we're getting toward the end of the good hog cycle, and we're trying to decide what's wise into next year on percentiles. Do we try to achieve a 80 or a 90 percentile profit, or do we really try to just lock in a 70th percentile and shut up and keep going? And so that's how we look at hedging, and then we have to do a basis risk, and we manage some of that by having a lot of our own grain, or we use our own grain locally to manage basis, and then we use spreads in the hog stuff to manage seasonal basis also. So we're probably, last year we were in hedging 101, and we're probably in 201 now, or 301. And it just, at our level now, I don't think you can do much with financing without it. And everything's just too risky. Everything is really too volatile.
Are you looking forward at forward contracting or hedging fuel or fertilizer or any of that, or is it just pretty much about feed and hogs at this point?
We don't buy much fertilizer.
Yeah.
So most of our, we buy 28% or 31 or whatever Jeremy buys, and we can store maybe half a year's own stuff, maybe even. But fuel, we are looking at hedging. We have a lot of trucks on the road. We just are adding 5 trucks and hauling that one market home. So we are pricing out a fuel station here and hope to be able to hold probably $30,000-$40,000 of fuel. And then we can take semi-load dumps of that, and that allows us then to be able to trade futures to the customer. Corn, soybean meal, hogs, we do have the mills that we work with for the combination. And we have our own hedging account also. There are a lot of times we'll have the market trigger the hedges, and then we transfer them to the companies who do this as well.
Anybody got any questions, or just need to take a deep breath and take it all in for a minute? It's a lot to do this. Look,
we're doing the same thing we did 20 years ago. It's just a whole other lot. From regulation to hedging to ethics to illegal aliens to all kinds of things. Everything's an issue that way.
very complicated world, isn't it?
Right.
Any questions before we go outside? Decide why would we want to go outside?
Maybe there's some good breeze.
Maybe. Maybe not.
Okay.